Hello, everyone. My name is Maggie Crowley, and I am studying to become a grades 5 through 12 social sciences secondary education teacher. And today I'm going to be presenting on becoming a professional decision maker. So, being a professional as a teacher helps build a positive classroom environment for students. Awareness of external factors and professional expectations supports effective decision making in the classroom. The topics in this presentation explore why professionalism in teaching is important to me and highlight the factors that contribute to the evolving education system. So first, starting with self-assessment and reflection, three ways in which I'd use self-assessment and reflection to become an effective teacher are first to utilize formative assessments or tests that students don't have any pressure or they aren't really graded, but they really just show the teacher which ways in which their teaching is effective. For example, this could look like giving an exit ticket at the end of class to see if the students were able to understand the content taught. Second would be to implement student feedback. So this would first look like asking for student feedback um, throughout the course, and then giving using those suggestions into teaching to make it more effective in my teaching and also for student learning. And then thirdly would be peer observations. This would look like other co-teachers or administration at the school observing a class session or two and giving me feedback in order to become, again, a more effective teacher. And this is all important because it'll help me to have continual growth in my teaching throughout my entire career. All right, so the next topic is professional development in the area of technology. So, why learn about technology as a teacher? First, technology continues to evolve as it has for generations. Secondly, it is helpful to instruction and integration into the classroom. Most school districts use technology as an everyday aspect of classroom instruction and learning. And then lastly, it's also used by students. So, learning as a teacher will help myself to be able to help my students. I plan to keep learning about technology by attending workshops on technology use and advancements. As again, like I said earlier, it is always evolving. And then also to do some like self-educating to myself on newer technology resources and guides such as AI and how AI can benefit teachers. So, safe and ethical usage of technology. First, three ways I would use technology in my classroom are the use of AI, Google Workspace, and then digital archives, and specifically relating to being a social sciences teacher. And then this how to teach like the safe and ethical use of these aspects of technology to my classroom. So starting with AI, AI can have a lot of positives, including it can give both teachers and students um, ideas, helping with brainstorming, and then overall just helps the whole learning process. That being said, it can lead to cheating and kind of just like a lack of the pursuit of knowledge because there isn't that looking for sources, as well as disinformation. So to combat this, I would state the clear expectations at the beginning of the year, as well as remind students throughout the year and hold those students and myself accountable. With Google's for workspace, this includes like Gmail, Google Drive, slides. This would be really helpful in creativity in the classroom as well, especially preparing students for life after college. And then lastly, digital archives is a really cool way for specifically history classes to use technology in today's day and age because it allows students to access things such as primary sources online. And again, to help teach students the safe and ethical use of technology, teaching how to use these sources as well as stating clear expectations throughout the year. The next topic is the code of ethics, which are a set of profession rules and guidelines holding teachers accountable. Three of the code of ethics for Minnesota that stood out to me were first, that teachers should be held, excuse me, a teacher, quote, a teacher shall provide professional educational services in a non-discriminatory manner. This is important to me because discrimination is absolutely prohibited in my own values as a teacher. And so having this code of ethics helps not only myself stay accountable, but also to be aware of my own bias and prejudice going into a classroom setting. Secondly, a teacher shall a teacher shall make reasonable effort to protect the student from conditions harmful to health and safety. This is really important because I want to be caring as a teacher and help my students in whatever they may need. If that might be providing them with resources that can further help them with what they need. And then thirdly, a teacher shall not deliberately suppress or distort subject matter. This is pretty relevant to my content and licensure area, being social sciences, because sometimes those historical events can be misinterpreted and then mistaught. So I would want to make sure I held myself accountable in doing this. I also want to make sure that by upholding the code of ethics that I have appropriate boundaries as a teacher, including on social media with the families of my students as well as my students as a whole. So going into the history of education next. So three policies that have really heavily impacted the history of education in Minnesota. So starting with number one, which is property taxes, which have led to inequitable education in Minnesota. So different districts receive different funding in the state of Minnesota, leading to drastic disparity between these districts. So a change that could combat this is to switch to a state-funded public education system or level the playing field, which kind of go hand in hand. So basically make each district have equitable and equal funding. The second policy is school choice policies, which have led to inequitable education in Minnesota, which is basically where students can choose to open enroll in other districts or at charter and private schools. However, not every Minnesota family has the option to choose what school their child attends, which again leads to an equitable education access. So, possible change for this is to invest more in traditional public schools so that students in those districts and communities and those families will prefer to actually have their student attend that school rather than open enroll in a different district or school setting. Third would be expulsion policies, which have also led to inequitable education in Minnesota. So in Minnesota, Indigenous, Black, and students with disabilities are more likely to get suspended than white students in Minnesota. So some data from 2015 to 2016 from the Minnesota Department of Human Rights shows that Indigenous students were 10 times more likely, Black students were 8 times more likely, and students with disabilities were 2 times more likely to get expelled than students that were white, which is unacceptable. And so some change that could combat this are to prohibit expulsion for students from grades pre-K through third grade, and then also prohibit expulsion for students due to attendance or truancy. And then this is all important because these policies have led to a lot of structural disparities in the state of Minnesota, and they need to change to make a more equitable and accessible education system in our state. So next, I'm going to talk about culturally affirming in relationships. So this is when, quote, schools and families work together, which leads to student outcomes improving across their grades, attendance, behavior, well-being, as well as heightened school readiness. So three ways in which I will um, work to create culturally affirming relationships with my students as well as their families are to use multilingual resources to communicate with families so that it's equal and accessible across every family, and then communicate student success stories to their parents as well as just keep them in the loop with how the students are doing in the course in general on both positive and more negative elements. And then thirdly, organize a culture fair, which would relate to my licensure area of social sciences with students and their families welcomed. And then in conclusion, in understanding the roles and responsibilities that teachers have as professionals. I am excited for the opportunity to create a positive classroom environment for my students. Additionally, understanding that students are not the only ones learning at school is beneficial in being able to be an effective teacher. Thank you.